Thank you for tuning in to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I've got Brian Ganz on. He is the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the San Jose Sharks. And we're going to learn all about how he got to be there and what he's doing now to keep that team heading toward the playoffs. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder and click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on each weekly episode, which, if you haven't found out yet, airs every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. Hope you enjoy the show, and here we go. Brian's not my first guest from the Sharks organization. Of course, Mike Potenza on when I originally started the podcast. He was one of my first guests, and of course, I've had him since then because he's now the director of performance or head strength coach for the Golden State Warriors, and he's left the NHL behind, and obviously has opened up some spaces in the Sharks organization because you are now the assistant strength conditioning coach for the San Jose Sharks. First of all, congratulations on joining the organization, but I would love to know how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for having me. And it is great to be a guest on your podcast. I've since, talking with you and stuff, listened to a couple episodes and cruised through the library of episodes. And it's quite a list of guests. So yeah, thank you. And I'm honored to be here. But it's been a great season so far coming back to the Sharks organization. I actually did get a start under Mike Potenza way back, 2011, 12 maybe, as a summer intern. And then that transitioned to a in-season sort of part-time help under his guidance as well. And then progressed to a full-time position in the American Hockey League when the Barracuda came out here in 2015. So that was part of the relocation. When they were from Worcester, the league sort of did a move out west, so teams were closer to their affiliates. So I did that, the first year they were out here in San Jose, and wow, what an eye-opening experience, and really drinking from the fire hose, as they say. Season.
What was that like? I mean, what are you talking about?
So just going from, in season in the National League, not always being, around or maybe traveling or kind of in the trenches to now being the guy in the American League with less than ideal circumstances, resources, budget, things like that. You really have to learn quick and adapt to the situations that you're in, whether it's a practice facility or a game rink that might not have everything that you had hoped for, or everything that you thought was going to be there. Dealing with different now personalities in the room, and players needs and wants and expectations. But yes, that first year was a great experience. Looking back at it, the long hours, early mornings, situations like that really kind of molded me as a strength and conditioning professional.
So where did you go to school? What college?
Graduated Arizona State, my undergrad. The exercise and wellness department right at that time was kind of merging with the College of Health and Innovation. So we were merged in with like nursing and stuff like that for some classes and some of the select electives and things like that. And then just did various internships again with Potenza, obviously, but also at the University of Washington up in Seattle under Henry Ruggiero. And then just started learning, kind of getting my feet wet, coaching, training anyone, any clientele, population, age, sport, didn't matter. I was open and willing to take on any person who'd let me help them improve their life or their movement or strength, whatever it may be. But decided to go back to school a few years later out at Cal U outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Did that online actually, and got my master's in sport performance injury prevention.
Okay, so for the listening audience, there's a couple of things that Brian's thrown out there already in terms of gems. One is how he got to be with the Sharks was through internships, and we hear that over and over. Find some internship programs and apply for them because never know where it will lead. And then also, you were in Arizona at Arizona State, but
Yeah.
you looked elsewhere, up in Washington. I mean, that's a pretty big journey up there. What made you not look around the Arizona area, or if you did and didn't find anything, what made you set your sights elsewhere?
Yeah. So, part of that degree at Arizona State, I actually did have to perform or complete an internship my last year, my last semester. So I was actually looking around the area, and at the time, I believe it was API. This is pre-Exos, and I actually sent a resume application letter saying, "Hey, this is what I need to do. Can I do it?" I ended up not getting the position at API, so I found a private facility called Athletic Republic. And it was cool because it was attached to the Phoenix Coyotes youth organization's rink called the Ice Den. And they had a synthetic hockey treadmill, and they specialize in not only off ice training, but then also all kinds of youth training. So my internship for the school was, working under the hockey director at the Ice Den, or excuse me, Athletic Republic, training youth athletes, hockey players, working on this synthetic treadmill. And then after I graduated, I knew I wanted to come back to the area. And so I hit up Mike Potenza and was so fortunate that he was able to get back to me and told me to come on in for a couple days. And those days were just, observing, eyes wide, mouth shut, notebook open, just writing down notes as fast and as thorough as I could. And then just from there, hard work, good attitude, and can go a long way.
Oh, well, first of all, you're not the first dog owner to be on the show with me. So there's been several other dogs that have been on the podcast with us. What's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Muzzy. Nickname for mustache. Yeah.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, Muzzy's welcome to be on Zealous with us. Curious though, Brian, when it comes to hockey, very few people think, "Oh yeah, let's go to Arizona." So was hockey something in your early years? Were you a hockey athlete yourself? Did you play hockey growing up, or what was that like?
I was, growing up in the Bay Area. I'm from San Jose originally, Sunnyvale more specifically, just up the road. The Sharks came into the league in the early 90s, and with California kind of being a hub of rollerblading and things like that, yeah, I just took to street hockey, roller hockey, any sort of hockey I could get my hands on. I was playing it, and just fell in love with the sport. And then as I grew up, I wasn't necessarily the biggest or fastest when I was playing my, club travel hockey. So I discovered early on that, in order to be better on the rink, you had to train off of it. So, some of my earliest memories were coaches, telling me, go for like a jog or go for a run. And then I always knew it wasn't the same, just the feeling that I experienced when I was running versus the feeling I'd experienced during a game. So then I started incorporating, some jumps and some lunges, and I'd, go to the school that I was attending at the time. That was a quick walk from my house, and hit the basketball courts and do various like start, stop sprints up and down the basketball courts and lunges. And so, yeah, that's how I got started. I mean, I've always been an active kid. I grew up playing, soccer, basketball, baseball, later into some golf. And so, yeah, there's no shortage of movement and activity, but I knew that to be better at sport, you had to put in the work off of it, off the rink or off the court, whatever it may be.
So it's got to be just thrilling to be back home in San Jose and actually work for the team that you kind of grew up with.
Yeah, and it is. It's very cool. I think I've always kind of traveled around and spent time overseas, abroad, Europe, things like that after college, and been a bit of a adventurer, a wanderer. But now getting older, it's nice to be close to home. Both my parents, my sisters, I got some nieces and nephews now. So it's definitely nice being, 20 minutes versus, 3.5 hours like I was in Bakersfield.
And when it comes to going from the American Hockey League to the national, obviously we're looking at deeper purses, bigger budgets, more things at your disposal. But what about education and the knowledge base? Like, what's that like in the AHL with the staff there compared to the NHL? Is it pretty homogenous, or are you taking a step up in terms of learning there too?
Within our organization specifically, I feel like everyone is so smart and so well educated, but still so open and receptive to learning more and, picking the brains of others. So just because you may or may not be in the National League, like, doesn't mean, you can't learn or you can't get better. We have two fine strength coaches in the Barracuda on the other side. We call it, next door, because we're literally next door as far as buildings go, which is another thing that we're so fortunate to have, is being the closest you could possibly be as far as proximity. But Matt Duran and the head coach Rachel, she is so bright. Both of them are so smart, and man, anytime we come together and whether it's a meeting or some sort of catch up, I'm always trying to see what they're doing over on their side. Rachel spent some time out east at Northwestern under like some bright strength coaches. So she's all into the triphasic and stuff like that. But as far as collaboration goes, I mean, I feel very fortunate to be around three smart individuals like them two, and then Steve Delestro.
All right. So triphasic training, Cal Dietz, you guys are studying his work a little bit. Sounds like it.
Yeah. She's all into that, and we're trying our best to take it all and try to learn. And excuse me for that, but so like I was saying, but whatever level you're at doesn't mean like you're smarter or better than anyone else. I think everyone at each level has so much to learn and has a lot to offer as well.
And within the world of strength conditioning, especially as it relates to hockey, what is intriguing you? What are you exploring? Whether it's velocity-based training or unilateral strength versus bilateral, what is it that you're really intrigued by?
As boring and simple as it may be, I love just good old-fashioned training. So, I love unilateral stuff, but in the last couple of years, you worked with the catapult system in Bakersfield. So player load management, all that stuff is super fascinating. And then when I get to San Jose here this last season, they're on the polar system, first beat. So looking at heart rate data, trimp per minute, things like that now is sort of my world. And that is so fascinating to me, trying to dissect and dive into that data and see if there's any trends or anything that we can spot before it's too late. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, if I can get sweaty and get heavy underneath, a barbell or, some heavy dumbbells, that's what fascinates me. But, in doing so safely and in a healthy manner.
And so you mentioned like, markers, I guess, that are going to help with injury mitigation. Are there things that you're seeing right now that you could share, anything in that realm?
Yeah, and I should mention, in addition to First Beat, we also have the Vald Force Decks, and so now when we have our guys jump, Steve-O is kind of let me take over that project as far as assessing the jump tests, assessments, whatever you want to call them, and then collecting and compiling the data. So that's another little section of data that we're looking at as well. And so whether it's a return to play or just a readiness state that we're jumping in, or that we're looking at the data, excuse me. That's also very fascinating to see, trends over time, either from, guys or positional stuff. But I'm sorry, to answer your original question, markers and stuff like that, we are trying to hone in on that. It's a great question, because, the data is great, and data collection is great, but you got to actually be able to use it, analyze it. So that's the tricky part.
So with the Barracuda coming out from Worcester and being in San Jose, is there an intermingling between your developing team and the starters with the Sharks?
Is there, I'm sorry, repeat that again?
Do you have intermingling? Is there both teams coming together for conditioning at any point in time, whether it's in the off season or preseason?
No. So, yes, at camp, everyone's a Shark and under one roof until, there's some cuts and stuff like that. But no, they do a great job of keeping it separate when they need to, just, per the CBA and all the league rules and stuff like that. But no, staff wise, we're trying to always kind of, buzz over back and forth just to pop in, or, maybe the other side, the CUDA are on the road and they have the guy staying back. So yeah, there's a little bit of staff just checking in. And
what's the in terms of game numbers between AHL and NHL seasons, what's the difference between the two?
So right now the AHL, I believe, is at 62, 64, somewhere in the low 60s, but there's a plan in place to increase in the next number of years to get closer to a NHL 82, but don't quote me on those exact numbers. So originally it was less games to be more developmental, right? So they have more practice days, more training opportunities. But yes, now they're slowly starting to increase.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be that close. So how does it work with your programming during the season? Like right now, we're approaching the second half of the season, and obviously you've got game day, then you've got game day -1, game day -2, and so on.
Yeah.
But do you have the program already laid out all the way through the season? Then you just tweak it a little bit here and there based on the player's position and their situation?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. And the last 3 years, again, working in the American League with that schedule a bit more sporadic or spaced out, I was able to go through and do kind of exactly what you said, schedule out various days within phases of the season based on, how many days before the game. And like you said, game day -1, game day -2. And of course, stupid me thinking, oh, I have this all figured out. When I transitioned to the National League, I kind of presented this idea to Thivo, and he kind of gave me like the chuckle, like, yeah, that's, sorry, kid, like that's not how it works over here, because the schedule is so, go. They do have so many games. They're traveling late night, early morning, land-ins, load-ins. So what we do is pretty much before each month, we'll go through and put in where we think we can get in, whether it's a team lift on a practice day or a post-game lift after a game, or what we call sort of like a primer lift, which would be some like potentiation type training that would be a day before a game. And then we go from there. And just like they say, hockey, everything is subject to change. So you got to be ready to pivot, and you got to be ready to pivot often. So yeah, to answer your original question, we try to go through and set out certain workouts in certain phases of the year. We know, in the early in the season after training camp, guys are going to be very fit, but they're also going to be very fatigued from the grind that training camp is. And then you kind of look forward to the time we're in now. They call it the dog days, whether it's, late February, early March, and guys are worn down and soft tissue injuries are appearing and minor tweaks and bumps are here and there. So you got to now tweak your training due to that. So yeah, it's very, very what's the word? It's very fluid. How about that? It's very fluid.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, of course you have systems and, templates in place and phases that you're trying to accomplish or a stimulus you're trying to go after, but just know that, it might not be as perfect as you'd hope.
Oh, yeah, because there's chaos within order too.
It's controlled chaos. Exactly.
That's it. So what about this, Brian? You get a West Coast series going on, you play the Kings, you go up play the Kraken and so on, but then you're all in the same time zone. So in terms of sleep patterns and programming, I am imagining it's probably a good deal different than when you're on the East Coast series and you're playing Hurricanes, the Bruins, or the Devils, or whomever.
Yeah.
So what is there much of a difference between like when you guys are on the East Coast for a series or for a week or so?
Yeah, and it is, and we started, speaking of travel, we started this year out in Prague for the global series. So sleep has been at a premium since day one, but as a West Coast team and in Northern California specifically, we've always had more travel than other teams.
Sure.
And so that's another thing that I've learned from Steve-O, the importance of sleep and recovery and, facilitating that like parasympathetic state. So we hound the guys on good sleep hygiene, good sleep environment. We provide a lot of magnesium, tart cherry juice, vitamin C to help metabolize all the caffeine that they had earlier in the day and pregame, to get it out of their systems a bit quicker. So yes, going east and traveling across multiple time zones is a grind, and the guys do their best to handle it. We try not to give too much melatonin and have that be sort of like a crutch for the guys. Now, if we do cross over multiple time zones, we do these sleep packets and we'll drop some in for the guys as needed. But like I said, it's mostly big hitters like zinc, magnesium, stuff like that.
And then as we get into the dog days, do you work more with the soft tissue because of the breakdown and maybe a little less of the loading?
Yes, and you're absolutely right. This position as strength and conditioning coaches in pro sports, hockey specifically, and at this time of the year, it's more so of creating some recovery and sort of mitigating stress than it is, pushing the load and going for, numbers and intensity like that. Of course, there's going to be some examples where maybe a player isn't playing that much and maybe he is young and has a younger training age and can handle that. And then, for them, we will train a little bit harder, or maybe we add in an extra set, on his workout, or maybe we change the loading so he does get some, axial loading via safety squat bar versus, kettlebell goblets. So there's ways we can manipulate it based on the player and their needs. But you're right, a lot of these workouts, quote unquote workouts here, are kind of just a glorified warm up. It's to get the guys moving. It's to spend some time working on their T-spine. It's some time to get into the groin and psoas and things like that. So just stuff to keep the engine running, to keep the pilot light burning a little bit, and then collaborating with our medical staff and massage therapists, stuff like that, for any certain hot spots or targeted areas.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is like, as a strength conditioning coach, how much hands-on in regards to like soft tissue work? Are you just leaving that up to the massage
Yeah.
therapists and the athletic trainers and the physical therapists? Or as strength coaches, have you been kind of just encouraged by those that I just mentioned? Hey, just dig in there when you're doing some warm-ups. What is that like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, luckily at the National League level, we have a lot of personnel and people on staff that can get their hands on them. Steve-O actually has his, he does is it Stretch to Win, I believe is like the certification or the program he did. So he's able to do, a little bit of some fascial stuff, some stretching stuff, some of the guys. But I leave it with my certifications and my expertise. I leave it to the LMTs and ATCs and things like that.
Okay, now you also mentioned getting into the groin, doing some mobility drills for the hips, pelvic region, but also the T-spine. What are your go-tos for a professional hockey player? What are the movements that you typically run them through for getting some T-spine mobility and pliability?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And, a lot of people, whether it's, Gen Pop or whoever it may be, they want to just hammer on the mobility and the stretching and things like that. And while that might be all right, we tend to go a bit more like dynamic mobility, and then even maybe just some stability as well to get the areas a bit stronger. So in our warm-ups every day, we do some combination of like I said, T-spine, shoulder, posterior shoulder, groin, hip, adductor work. So to name off a few, we do this sort of like kind of like lateral thread the needle, where your leg, you got a little ankle
kind of a side
mobility
plank position.
No, why am I blanking on the name? Like a rocking, like adductor stretch, kind of. But now you have your upper body, and you're able to kind of thread the needle, right arm under the armpit, and then even rotate up to the ceiling as that leg is extended out, and you're rocking back and forth to get some adductor in there. That's a great sort of bang for your buck. Another one is kind of just a bretzel. Again, that's a little bit more of a static one, but we've added in sort of a little rock to it as well, using some breath work to open up T-spine. Then let's see, we got like some hip stability. We do this little single leg glute bridge hold, but then holding a plate or a kettlebell, we'll do like a straight arm pullover. That's a good combination exercise. And then from there, some guys, have their trainer, strength coach, guy, person, whoever that, they train with at home. So they'll kind of bring in stuff that they like and that makes them feel good. So we sort of blend it in with our stuff and make it a little bit of a melting pot of just movement patterns and general dynamic warm up.
So with adductor strains being near the top of the list when it comes to NHL injuries, how do you look at the relationship between abduction and adductors, inside thigh, outside thigh? Do you do a program for that where you're trying to improve the response between both sides? Because we're obviously having some imbalances there. How do you mitigate that?
Yeah, and there are going to be some asymmetries. So in the camp, we'll do both FMS and some SFMA stuff, including Y balance. So we're able to look at ankle mobility, things like that, and then our medical staff will have ranges of motion at each joint and things like that. So if there are injuries that come up, we have those numbers to look at baseline. So then we can train and reference those baseline numbers, whether they're getting better or they're better than they were at camp, or how bad is the injury, right? How much range of motion did they lose? But no, through the training program throughout the year, we have those on hand, but it's not like we're doing, 2x12 on some adductor groin squeeze today. So we're going to have to do, 2x12 on the abduction right following that. We just kind of blend it in over the course of time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, especially when you're talking about being on ice. I mean, we could call it closed chain, but it's a really loose closed chain compared to, say, sprinters or even basketball players that have a lot of three-dimensionality in their movement. Your players are having a lot of explosiveness. Obviously, they're sprinting up and down, but they're doing it in a very unique way where there's a lot more frontal plane action. So do you just kind of, you mentioned FMS and SFMA, SFMA can be three-dimensional, definitely multiplanar, whereas the FMS is almost strictly sagittal plane bias for the most part. Do you have other kinds of things within the weight room that when you watch a player doing, say, a step up or some kind of squat, deadlift, single leg action, things that you're looking for where there's a breakdown?
Yeah. So, I mean, just a couple to rattle off here, top of my head. Any bilateral squat, we try to front squat all our guys, but if not, safety bar squat. But we're just looking any hip shift. If they're, biasing one side or maybe staying away from one side, that's a little kind of indication to see, okay, is something going on that we don't know about? Are they trying to hide something? And then we can even go deeper and look at their jump scores. Okay, is the asymmetry kind of consistent through movements? Is it, does it show up under heavy load, or does it get disguised with ballistic movement? So like we can see if that's telling a story. And then anything on one leg, we just like to see if there's any strength discrepancy side to side. Or maybe like if they're doing a single leg stance, if their hips, one side's kind of dropping, they're losing that leg lock. And then of course, if you go upper body, we don't go directly overhead and vertical pressing too much with many of our guys will use like a landmine variation or incline press. So that would show, okay, maybe some guys have lack of shoulder flexion. And then that could be referencing back to FMS with shoulder impingement, if it cleared or anything like that.
And do you find a difference between the variation of shoulder flexion based on where they're holding their stick?
Not based on where they're holding their stick, but it does seem, shoulder injuries, sublocks, labrum, whatever it may be, or those injuries are so common in hockey just because it's a contact sport. So we just try to always, err on the side of caution and, Hippocratic oath, do no harm. If we don't know, right? And then if we do know, it's just to modify and adjust accordingly. But I think it's cool to see how guys move and if they do compensate, whether or not they know it or they did have an injury, then we can, explain to them, we can show them. And with the vol data on the jump mat specifically, on the force deck specifically, you can pull up the, force time analysis and show them okay, this is how it looks on your right side, this is how it looks on your left side, and get pretty deep down the rabbit hole. And some guys are super receptive and they want to know all that. And some guys aren't. And they're like, well, this is cool, or I think, thank you for showing me, but I'm still gonna, go out and score goals and it's not gonna affect how I play hockey. You're okay, you got to sort of know when to back off and let a hockey player be a hockey player, but you also got to know when to intercept that and interject as a strength and conditioning professional, be like, yes, but maybe this would allow you to score more goals. Maybe this would allow you to play 22 minutes instead of 19 minutes. Maybe this would allow you to get another contract and things like that. So it just comes down to managing the personnel and the styles.
Yeah, I get you. So you mentioned squats also just before that, with maybe a hip shift or maybe potentially the knee goes a little bit more varus. We typically use some corrective resistance bands. I say corrective, I'll just say resistance bands that draw them in the direction that the body is preferring to go. So feeding them deeper into the mistake, if you will, so that it turns on the muscles that are just counteracting that to pull them back into a more balanced or centrated place. And we may do that around the knees. We also use some little foam wedges underneath the feet if we're seeing a discrepancy down there. What kind of tools do you use, like on the fly, when you're seeing somebody that does have a hip shift when they're doing squats? And by the way, I love the fact that you're doing mainly front-loaded squats, not the
Yeah.
overhead squats or the back squats.
No. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's as far as like correctives and stuff. I mean, the banded RNT work, I think is fantastic and can be so simple that oftentimes like it, gets kind of poo-pooed on. But I think any cue or corrective that, whether physical or verbal, that gets the athlete to perform what you want them to perform or to perform the movement better is the cue and corrective that works. But, having said that, the wedges under the feet will do that as a little bit of a heel lift for guys that might just need a little bit more ankle mobility, some in the bottom position of the squats or whatever it may be. And then, you touched on using various wedges around the feet and toes and stuff like that. And I actually saw your post about your presentation or the speaking event that you're going to do. That was very fascinating because I've never done really any more than just a heel wedge under the feet while squatting, and then maybe lateral edge when doing some like iso holds for like big toe and stuff like that. Or I guess that'd be medial edge for big toe and stuff like that.
Well, next time you find yourself on this side of the hill in Santa Cruz, we'll have a little, a melding of the minds, and we'll break out those wedges.
Yeah.
So then, as we're getting closer, you guys are kind of in the middle of the brackets, but you're getting up higher and higher. Sharks are climbing the ladder there, and we're getting close to the playoffs. How does that change programming for you guys?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. I don't know exactly because currently right now we're not in a playoff spot. So I don't know in years.
I'm just being hopeful here. I'm being totally hopeful.
I do
am a Sharks
appreciate it.
fan.
I do appreciate it. Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I wish I knew. I wish I could answer. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how that would affect. I haven't had that experience yet, and I don't know.
And I know it's pretty much conjecture at this part, but let's just say that you're near the bottom of the brackets, and is that like, do you think teams in the NHL, I know you can't speak for them, but maybe in the AH, just in your experience with teams that know that there isn't a playoff hope in their future, what is that like in terms of programming? Do they just pour it on harder? They just keep the course and try not to do anything different?
Yeah, I think they're like, if I were to put myself in that position as a head guy or whatever, and knowing the team wouldn't be in the playoffs, I think you got to just stick to the plan, stick to the route, and see it throughout the end of regular season. I think maybe if you tried to change the program, if you try to change it too fast, too drastically, you might lose some guys. And also you might create too much soreness because they are still playing games. So you still got to be mindful of the goal, right? And unfortunately, the goal isn't to be the strongest in the weight room. Even if your team's not making the playoffs, you still got to go out and perform at their best each night. So yeah, to answer your question, I mean, until the final season of the game, final game of the season rolls around, I think you stick to your plan, you stick to your phases. You keep the guys, in the best shape as they can without doing too much volume and keeping your guys happy and healthy. But, some guys, players, are they checked out? Do they get checked out? I don't know. You have some of their players playing for a contract, so they can't afford to be checked out, right? They gotta go in and perform, whether or not their team's going to make it into the postseason. But I think as a strength coach, you gotta have your plan, you gotta have it set, and you gotta see it through. because at the end of the day, you got to believe in your program. So there shouldn't be any issue to kind of jump ship and go, rogue, because then that shows the guys, these players are smart guys. They're going to know, be able to sniff it out if you know what you're doing, or if you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. So I think it's in your best interest to stick to your guns and see it out.
Okay, so with that happy, healthy professional hockey player in the weight room, what are your go-to lifts for lower body strength and power?
So I am a huge rear foot elevated split squat guy. I love my RFEs. I've recently gotten really into skater squats too. I know there's a little bit more of some instability involved there. So some might argue you can't go as heavy for, pure strength. But then, bounding, hopping variations, whether it's band assisted, lateral bounds, for lower body strength and power, I think simpler is better. I mean, you can even go trap bar jumps, or just a classic trap bar if you're looking for bilateral strength. But I'm meat and potatoes, and I think with the proper loading and intent, a heavy RFE can go a long way.
And then what about lower leg? Because we're talking about
lower leg.
No. You answered it perfectly.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking also on top of that, because I'm going to go into upper body next. But considering that these guys are skating around at 30 miles an hour or whatever, and they are on this thin blade, there's a lot of inversion, eversion. There's a lot of that kind of wobble. So most people, research is going to show that if you do things on unstable surfaces, actually the threat response kicks in, and you don't get the force production you want. The outcome is not what you're hoping for unless they are used to it. So do you go for unstable environments when it comes to lower leg conditioning?
Yes and no. So like in a rehab setting, like we'll get some guys on some single leg balance on a ARX pad and stuff. We do have some players that like the Bosu ball for their kind of personal work. But then the last couple of years I've gotten into like isometric holds for calf and ankle, whether it's bent knee or straight leg, and then again in different planes. So you go like a lateral squat and then have that working leg in a calf raise isometric to kind of keep the ankle complex healthy and strong. So that's kind of something I put in my prep work.
Do you ever put it on a wobble board while they're in that lateral squat and have them kind of go in and out?
I have not. Okay. No, only just just a heel wedge, but turned there to the side, and that's actually something I stole from the CUDA crew next door with Rachel and Maddie. So, but yeah, I haven't tried it on the wobble board. I'm gonna have to give that a go.
Just curious. Okay, then when it comes up time for the upper body, obviously we're talking about just even skating. It's contralateral, one arm going forward, one arm going back, one leg going forward, one leg going back. But so do you do alternating like a cable press and pull to generate opposing action, or do you primarily stick like your go-to for upper body power is going to be the traditional bilateral movements, or are we talking unilateral?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Geez, for power, I kind of do a little bit of both. I'm trying to reference back to my program when I was in Bakersfield. We had some jammer arms, so we would get really explosive with a rotational one arm jammer press, and we would band that to get a little bit more resistance towards the lockout. This year, we're doing a lot of landmine push press, whether it's rotational or just from a high split. My time with Exos, I learned, the Kaiser rotational push pull. I love that drill if you have the Kaiser machine. And then just various med ball work. again, kind of gets glossed over depending on, you know, what your program is or what's fancy and sexy out there. But I think, again, coming back to intent and proper exercise selection, I mean, med ball work from various stances, various positions can go a long way as well. And properly loaded med ball work, I think a lot of people out there want to toss around the 16, 18, 20-pound ball and might just be missing the boat with that when I'm pretty sure you can get by with a 6, 8, maybe even a 10-pound ball. But yeah, if you're going after true rotational power, I mean, yeah, you get a nice cement wall or a really brave strength and conditioning intern and a light med ball, and you can get after it.
And we also have one of those cable bars where just one end clips into the cable system, but you're holding on with both arms and doing some rotational power with that, or pressing out. I imagine you guys do the same thing.
Yeah, we have some of those cook bar attachments for the Kaiser. We use them for more like stability chop or stability lift. And then if we are going into like a dynamic lift or chop, I usually just take the cable rope but pull it all the way through, and now we're doing it that way. And then don't forget K-box too. I was fortunate enough to get really fortunate enough to have some K-boxes in the Oilers organization down in Bakersfield, and I got really into training on those too. So setting up different ways to get, you know, one arm row on that rotational row, and then again adjusting the flywheel on that to get whether you want more strength biased or power biased, like velocity biased upper body action.
I think we could keep on going with this, but we are coming to an end, Brian. I really appreciate you taking some time away from the schedule that is fairly hectic with you guys, and giving me a little bit of time and explaining a whole bunch of what you're doing with the Sharks. And of course, you know, there's nothing like going to the Shark Tank and watching a game. It's fantastic. I will say, coming from Boston, I thought that was hockey town. I would never have thought San Jose, California would give them a run for their money, but it is doing just that. If people want to find out more about Brian Ganz or the San Jose Sharks and all that, where are we going to go?
Yeah, so I'm not the most active on Twitter. I'm mostly Instagram. That's going to be just at GNAIRB. It's Brian G backwards. Don't try to look into it too much. It's what I chose from day one and have never changed it. So that's my handle on Instagram. LinkedIn as well. I'm trying to be a bit better on there, but yeah, shoot me a message or follow me on Instagram. And other than that, I just wanted to thank you and send you all the appreciation I have for having me on here. You can tell I love getting into the weeds and talking about exercise selection and all that cool stuff that is strength and conditioning. So thank you so much for having me on.
Brian, it has been a pleasure. And just like that, we're at the end of yet another episode. Thank you, Brian, and the Sharks organization for allowing you to come on and share what you did. And you mentioned, yes, I will be doing some presentations pretty soon this year. Let's see, May 20th, the New Jersey State Clinic for the NSCA. I'll be presenting on conditioning for adventure sports athletes. And then the end of June, beginning of July, I'll be at the Perform Better Training Summit, Long Beach, California, where I'll be presenting on a whole bunch of things related to gait, foam wedges, and a whole bunch more. And then the NSCA National Conference, July 12th to the 15th in Vegas, where I'll be talking about a whole bunch of stuff for strength and conditioning, of course. So maybe throw a few of those dates in the calendar, and we'll see you there. Until next week, have a good one.